Click OK. Now we'll begin. I'll ask our first panelist, my friend Nur Adila Omar, to please introduce yourself and your presentation. Dila?
Hi, hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, hi and assalamualaikum. Good morning and evening, everyone. My name is Nur Adila Omar. Today, I am going to present on profile of individual radicalization in Malaysia. Okay, as mentioned earlier by the moderator, I am one of the student scholars representing ISTAT to start Maryland University. At START, I am working closely with PRIM team, which is known as Profiles of Individual Radicalization in the United States, under the supervision of Michael Jensen, Patrick, and Liz. Thank you for the team for the fruitful knowledge and training throughout my visit at START. With the guidance from PIRE's team, we have come up with pathways for profiles of individual radicalization specifically for Malaysian contexts. Hence, today I will discuss all the pathways identified. Okay, when we talk about profiling, a lot of research has been done from varied institutions and universities, and also researchers such as coming from Siasat, IRIS, IMA Research, University Putra Malaysia, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, USIN, and many more. So I think it is important to note that each institutions, university, and researchers has come up with numerous interesting findings on the pathways and variable due to the complexity of this issue. Hence, today I will present my pathways based on my data collection. Okay, now we move to the content. Okay, for my presentation, I will be focusing on introduction, PRIM, theoretical framework, pathways, gap, significant, and also the future research. Okay, for my introduction, it is reported that 328 youth has been caught under the extremism-related issue out of 404. These cases has been reported by E8 in 2018. On the other note, it is stated that in the Berita Benar, there are 102 Malaysians in Syria, whereas 37 have died, 11 have returned back to Malaysia, and 44 are still in Syria. The number of the returnees is worrisome to the Malaysian government and society. Even though there is one successful terrorist attack at Movida Club Puchong, however, Royal Malaysian Police have made a good move when they have successfully fought 19 terrorist plots within Malaysia between 2012 to 2017. Due to this, in 2019, Malaysia has improved its Global Terrorism Index ranking, GTD, whereas Malaysia were ranked at 74 out of 138 countries. So the aim of the research is to investigate the nature of radicalization pathways on demographic conditions among Malaysian profiles in order to deduce an effective blueprint for preventing and countering violent extremism program, also for suitable rehabilitation approaches for Malaysian contexts. Okay, next I'll be moving to the next slide. PRIM. So for this slide, I'll be explaining a little bit what is PRIM all about. Okay, PRIM, I have coined it in terms of profile of individual radicalization in Malaysia. So it is a compilation of data or sample of individual Malaysian citizen who has supporting an Islamic terrorist group, mainly due to the ideological motive, who have radicalized within and outside Malaysia to the point of committing ideologically motivated illegal violent or non-violent acts in Malaysia or in the conflict zone. and they have been caught by the Royal Malaysian Police. The profile were collected from 2013 up to 2020 from court cases, MLJ, newspapers, article journals which are Lexis and Lexis, magazine, Diabic and Inspired, and in-depth interviews with the profiles, PDRM E8 to be specific, Malaysian Prison Unit, expert witness in terrorist-related cases, journalists, panel surveys of at-risk population, families of the profiles, and friends of the profiles. All the detainees has been caught under the Penal Code and AMLA TFA Acts. Okay, in order for me to identify the pathways of individual radicalization in Malaysia, I am using a combination theory of psychology, social identity and recruitment theory for producing demographic, group recruitment and psychological condition variables for each profiler. Okay, for psychology theory, I am using a model from Kruk-Lansky to emphasize on the complex of cognitive and emotional processes that motivate an individual's involvement in extremism. Okay, so by using this framework, the profiler will be investigating the individual's type of personality, trait of psychopathy, and state of mind. The second one is identity theory. This theory relates to the social identity theory from Hawke, Terry, and Edelman. This theory will focus on the individual's demographics such as race, gender, age. Okay, and the last theory is recruitment theory. The recruitment theory from Gerber, Daly, Borum will emphasize on the style of recruitment of the profilers. There are several variables that will be deduced from this framework, such as type of group join, task in the group, role in the group, impact from joining the group, and reasons for the group grievances of each profiler. Okay, next I am moving to the findings. For based on those theories, I have come up with several pathways specifically for demographic variables. First, age. Age is defined as the age of individual at their date of exposure, which is the date at which the individual extremist activity or plot first came to the public attention. Usually the time of incident or arrest or earliest mention of the individual in publicly available sources, so as long as these are related to the plot and radicalization of the individual. So based on the graph, the highest age of profiles who joined Islamic militant groups in Malaysia were from adult groups and followed by the youth groups. It indicates that adult groups were the targeted group for the Islamic militant agency in Malaysia. Okay, my finding would be different from other researchers, but this is based on my data collection. Okay, next is youth. Okay, if we look at the youth age, most of the most of the detainees who joined Islamist group were at the age of 27. Okay, and followed by 25 and 30 years old. Okay, next is gender. Based on the profiles, the percentage of males that have been caught on terrorism-related offenses was higher, 92% compared to female, 8%. This indicates that males are more easily recruited and sympathize with the Islamic militant groups compared to females. And most of the cases that I found out, usually the females, the number of females is not that high compared to the female. Okay, next to the male. Sorry. Next is ethnicity. Most of the profiles were Malaysian. This indicates that all the detainees were Muslim. That was why when we look at the language proficiency, the profiles, the highest language proficiency was Malay, because most of them were coming from Bumi Putras. Next is marital status. The majority of the detainees in Malaysia profiles were single. It indicates that single people have a higher tendency to join the Islamic militant groups in Malaysia. This is because they don't have any commitments, hence they do have a lot of free time. So they will find anything in order to occupy their free time. And aside from that, the reason why is because they wanted to feel valuable. Next is system of belief. Based on the graph, it shows that the majority, 100% of the profiles were were Muslim. Due to that, the first and only successful attack in Malaysia was at the Movida nightclub, since they believe their mission is to abolish all the places that are against with the Islamic teachings. Residency. From the above graph, from the stated graph, the highest profile were at Kelantan and followed by Selangor. There is none profile were living in Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Sarawak, Putrajaya, and Labuan. This is due to Selangor having a large population in comparison with other states. But when I look at the other researchers, there is a profiling or profile who were staying in Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Sarawak, and Putrajaya. Next is level of education. Based on the graph, the education levels of the profiles are varied. Majority, 60% profiles were degree certified, and all the profiles have finished from secondary school. It indicates that all profiles got a full education, and education is not the main reason in determining the reason for profiles in joining the Islamic militant groups in Malaysia. In fact, there is one lecturer who just recruited his student to join ICs. Okay, next is recruitment. Okay, next is employment status. Based on the graph, the majority, 36% of the profiles were employed and none of them were unemployed. Hence, employment is not the main indicator for the profiles to join Islamic militant group in Malaysia. Next is recruitment. Based on the graph shown, most of the profiles were recruited through online such as social media, Telegram, or YouTube, and followed by family, friends, and teacher. This is because they have a lot of time and most of the time are surfing the internet. Based on the profiles mentioned, that it is easy to get the information since it can be found everywhere in the internet. So that was why internet is the most easiest place to find this information. Next is event influence. If you look at the graph, 80% of the profiles were influenced due to the religion aspect. Most of them wanted to create an Islamic state and did not agree with the democracy style of government in Malaysia. Meanwhile, politics and economic sentiments just constitute on 10%. Next is external radicalization. As we know, violent extremism presents significant challenges to national and international security in every country. It is a global phenomenon which encompasses many diverse ideologies, drivers, and motivators. Hence, based on the data collection, there are several countries that bring an impactful effect to Malaysia due to its strategic location and hotspot in Southeast Asia, such as Syria, Turkey, Philippines, and Indonesia. Next is medium of influence. Based on the data collection, most of the profiles, 80%, were influenced through the internet and followed by traveling. Okay, next I am moving to the gap. Okay, as you can see, there are a lot of unknown percentage in each of my pathways. So due to that, the gap of my research is missing data and confusing data. Most of the news, okay, when we talk about missing data, most of the newspapers and journals did not provide a comprehensive data. Due to these research findings will fail to account for the causal conditions that can contribute to the radicalization process. So for the future research, I think we should focus on interview with the extremists, panel surveys of at-risk population in order to identify the missing condition. By doing this, we can serve as a foundation for future empirical work on radicalization and also act as a tool by which public officials, law enforcement, community organization, news media, and the general public in better understanding how individuals radicalize to the point of engaging in illegal behavior, since it is a complex process driven by the multiple causal factors. Next is confusing data. Since I am referring to a lot of newspapers, also journals, however, the information given were not tally with one another. For example, in terms of age, in one newspaper, it is stated that the age of the profiles were 23 years old. Meanwhile, in other newspaper, it is 30 years old. This range is quite big and it will bring an impactful result to the profiling. Hence, each newspaper agency, journalist, or journal editor needs to come up with one style of writing in order to have a coherent and tally information for the researchers. Next, I will be moving on the significance. There are several significance that I identified, which are theory and pathways. By doing this research, we can come up with a political theory, economic theory, and social theory based on extremism issues. Next is for the public sector, they will know where to find the research, okay, when we come up with the problem. Next is the society. This research can give an impactful or positive feedback to the community engagement and also for outreach program. Lastly, for the government, by having this kind of finding, it will help the government to come up with the policy and AP and also capacity building between stakeholders. And before I end my presentation, I think there is a need for us to do a future research in order to have a very rooted and comprehensive solution for this problem, such as to study the style of reporting and content from all Malaysian newspaper agencies on radicalization issues, to investigate the differences and similarity pathways of all extremist groups in Malaysia, not only focusing in Islamist group, but also other group as long as it is an extremist group. The next one is to identify the best method on preventing and countering violent extremism, PCVE, for youth in Malaysia, because currently youth are the targeted group for the recruitment. Lastly is to construct the best rehabilitation program based on the Malaysian occurrences. I think that's all from me. Thank you for your time. And if you have any question, feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Dila. That's very informative and very insightful. I have a few questions from the audience. The first question is from Neil. In your research, have you found any member of your demographics to be inclined to resorting suicide bombing to carry terror acts?
Hafiz, I'm so sorry. My internet is not that good. Would you mind to repeat it once again?
Okay. So I'm going to repeat it again. In your research, have you found any member of your demographics to be inclined to resorting suicide bombing to carry terror attacks, to carry terror acts?
Okay. Yeah, I did found there is several cases that wanted to form a suicide bombings, but they failed to do so. Yeah, unless there is one.
So the next question I'm going to ask is from Naim. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dila. Sorry.
Unless there is one case that I found from the Indonesian newspaper, there is a suicide bombings that has been planned in 2017. Yeah, and 2018. Okay.
All right.
right?
Can I ask? Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, sure.
So this is coming from Naim Azizi. How will this study ensure disengagement in prison, rehabilitation, and reintegration of radicalized individual or terrorist offenders? How will this study ensure disengagement in prison, rehabilitation, and reintegration of radicalized individual or terrorist offenders?
Would you mind to repeat the earlier question? I mean,
Okay, I can
the
repeat
first
it.
sentence. The first sentence.
So the first sentence is, how will this study ensure disengagement in prison,
Uh-huh.
rehabilitation, and reintegration of radical individuals or terrorist offenders?
Okay. In order,
I do
okay, for
believe that. Yeah.
okay, actually, it's hard for me to answer this question, but I will try my best. Okay, in order for us to really confident with the how can I say this? In order for us to really hang on, to answer, how to answer. Okay. In order for us to ensure these findings in terms of rehabilitation process, etc., there is where we are interviewing all the prison units and all the expert researchers in order to come up with a good findings. Because, okay, for example, I have mentioned just now that to identify successful approaches to disengage radicalized. Hang on, I just read the question. So identify successful approaches to disengage radicalized inmates and terrorist offenders. I will support training. Hang on, I'm confused with the question. Okay, to answer. Okay, how to answer? Okay, I just now I just mentioned we are okay. Based on my findings, I did a lot of interview with the Royal Malaysian Police, with the prison unit researchers, and also journalists. Hence, I think we have come up with a certain idea in order to ensure the rehabilitation program success. Aside from that, we will also develop a methodology with common standards in order to evaluate the effectiveness of reintegration programs. These all will be discussed between the prison unit, RMP, and all the experts on this area. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dila.
Yeah.
Right. So we're to respect everyone's time. We're gonna continue with the second panelist. I could not have Dila answer all of your questions, but hopefully we have more time for Q&A for a second and the remaining panelists. So the second panelist is Dr. Elmira Akhmitova. She will be the second panelist. Please introduce yourself and your research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, this is not my slide. Maybe the who is running the slides will change that to my slide, because the title of my slide is starting from the framework. Okay. Good morning and good evening, everyone. And I am the Elmira from International Islamic University, Malaysia. And this is that today I am going to present to you some results of our research, because I am not only the one who was doing research. And this is the letter I will show to you in the slide, that we were yes, this is the our slide. So we are 5 people in the group. And these 5 people, 3 of us are from International Islamic University, Malaysia, and Dr. Sharifa Shahira is from University Mara. And Muhammad Izzuddin Jafar he was our research assistant. And can we please go to the next slide? And this was the fundamental research grant under the Ministry of Malaysia, under the title of the Framework of Good Governance in Regulating Religious Extremism to Improve National Security in Malaysia. So today I am going to present to you some results of this research only, but the other results are already published, especially the survey results are already published. And today I will just give to you about the idea about the framework, how good governance can regulate religious extremism in Malaysia, especially to improve national security. So for our research, we were having the questions. Number 1 was how to identify religious extremism from Western and Islamic perspectives, because we really felt in the beginning sometimes, because of the difference in the value system and also in the different understanding of some practices, something what can be considered by Muslims as the norm can be considered as an extreme act. For example, the praying 5 times a day, or the fasting in the months of Ramadan, for example. So we try to come out with the specific definition of religious extremism and extremism suitable for Malaysia. And also these are the results are already published. And the second question for our research was why religious extremism is growing in Malaysia and how does it affect national security. So the first presenter was talking about the influence of ISIS or the Daesh. The Nur Adila was talking about the Daesh and the ISIS influence in Malaysia, how the Malays are joining the terrorist actions and also the extreme actions. And also we studied about the influence of the Wahhabism also to Malay society, and also the issue of Arabization. And the question number 3 was how to establish a framework for regulating religious extremism based on relationship between good governance and national security. So today I will give because time is very short, I will give the general overview of the framework to you after discussing of the factors. And the first one is about the validation, the first question. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yes, so in order to achieve this one, in the beginning, we did a questionnaire or the survey in KL in 2019 from 500 respondents. So the questionnaire was having the close-ended questions covering 4 main constructs of religiosity: the physical, social, spiritual, and cognitive elements. And also this is the number 1. Number 2, also we did interview with experts in the field, especially those who are working the long time, and also having some experience meeting of the people who were labeled as extremists in Malaysia. And please, can we go to the next slide? And after the questionnaire, the results, what we found that the public displayed tendencies towards religious extremism in areas such as exclusivity and superiority. So the Malays are, for example, the Muslims in Malaysia, we found that they are feeling exclusive and also inflexibility towards differences and suspiciousness towards the intention of non-Muslims. For example, 75.3% of respondents articulated that they felt more special than moderate Muslims and also non-Muslims when adhering excessively to religion. So, and the next slide, please. So we found that there is a hidden intolerance exists in Malay society related to the moderate Muslims who are not showing the religious attributes in public or the practice, and also towards the non-Muslims. So then can we go to the next slide, please? Then it will be the Nur Adila was also talking about how is about this existence of the inclinations towards extremism and especially religious extremism in Malaysia. But the very interesting for us, it was very interesting to find out what are the main factors for this increase of extreme behavior in Malaysia, because Malaysia for the decades after getting independence and also during the time of the process of getting independence, Malaysia was known as an oasis of moderate Islam. And all the time when in the books, we did some research on the earlier books, which were published in 1970s and 1980s. The scholars were and the experts were labeling Malaysian Muslims as a moderate Muslims. So what did happen in Malaysia? We tried to find the factors for the increase of religious extremism. So we divided it into two layers, as you can see here, in individual and external, internal and external. So internal is divided into two, individual and social cultural or the governance level, and external is related to what is happening outside of the country. So if we are looking at the internal, the individual, motives for the increase of the extreme behavior, we are, we listed here social grievances, emotional and psychological problems, economic problems like the unemployability and also the poverty, which is the rising in many modern societies today, and also the lack of the balanced understanding of Islam. So these all four the elements are related to the individuals. And actually, humans are incredibly pro-social creatures. And there has been noticeable decline in the mental health, happiness, and well-being of people in recent years. If we are looking at the World Happiness Report from the recent years, we will find that the people are feeling less happy in the modern times. So many individuals are suffering from personal trauma and grievances, and they are socially isolated or depressed, which makes them antisocial. And when they are antisocial, they are more receptive to extremist ideas. So Ahmad al-Muhammadi is calling these people vulnerable individuals. So, but we have to understand that having individuals with a radical mindset does not endanger national cohesion and security. But in the real danger is happening when such kind of the number of the unhappy and antisocial people, their number is rising. And also they will start being receptive to the extremist, the acts or extremist calls from outside or within the country. So let us move to the socio-cultural and the governance level of the factors. So we are still in the, okay. So here, no, can you go down, please? Back, okay, thank you. So radicalization of social conditions depends on the governance, education, and existing social norms. But at present, social structure and educational system, which create norms and lifestyle, are determined by governments. It's why we found that there is a direct link between the radicalization of the individual and the governance. So under social, cultural, and the governance level factors, we are talking about the consequences of colonialism, because the colonialism was it was the first step to politicize religion, because Islam was one of the main drives in anti-colonial struggle. But unfortunately, after the independence, the Muslim movements were not given the opportunity to rule. At the end, they become opposition parties, and later they became the opposition, and there was the politicization of religion, and also failure in religious education. Here we are mentioning, actually the Nur Adila was also mentioning, we are not talking here that the madrasas are creating the extremist understanding of religion only, but here is the failure of religious education. And also we are mentioning here some the reasons or the problems, social and political problems like the corruption, social ills, change of values and norms. So such kind of the problems in a long run are creating difficulties for people, and they are so as a result the entire society is going to be becoming extremist, and if the society is extremist, the individuals are who are living as a part of society are going to be more receptive to extremism. And if we are looking at the transnational level as an external factor, so this started the inclinations in Malay, among the Malay Muslims, inclinations towards the extremist understanding of Islam started from the time of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the Mujahideen movement, especially after returning back of the Afghan alumni to the Southeast Asia, because from this time the use of the concept like the military jihad and martyrdom became intensified. And also we are mentioning here, we studied the 9/11 as a factor, and the rise of Islamophobia also made the Muslims angry, because the Muslims, when they are looking at the other parts of the Muslim world, what is happening, like the proxy wars and also the results of the war on terror and the global realities, this makes people angry. In Assam, what we found that the prevalent extremism and radicalization of societies are a manifestation of the absence of good governance. So we can go to the next slide now. So as a result, since the next slide, yeah, please, thank you. So since we are having this, all the factors they are mainly because since we are living in the nation state level societies today, so educational and also the other reasons are all related to the governments can control, or governments can come out with the model in order to reduce religious extremism. So we are suggesting here the using of the soft power, not the force, but in order to reduce the extremism, which is the using good governance mechanism. If you are looking at the framework, you can see here the good governance mechanisms from the bottom I'm showing to you. It is at the governmental level by using the policies and institutions. So this is, since our factors are at the three layers, we are also suggesting in the middle strategies are, you can say, at the individual level, we are suggesting for the governments to provide human rights, economic opportunity and job security, and balanced education, also addressing social grievances. So these are the policies which are going to formulate or produce well-balanced individuals. So after that, after the well-balanced individuals, by using the strategies and the policy of the transparent and the accountable government, empowering youth, women, and B40, and also providing equal opportunities for all, and also the providing balanced education. So the well-balanced society will be established, and this will move to the well-balanced perspective at the global level because of the related to the government's attitude towards injustices, and also building moderate individual perspective of the citizens related to what is happening outside of the country. So let us move to because the time is very short, let us move to the concluding part where I will give, yes. So these are the results of our study. We found that none of the religions are a source of extremism, but can be manipulated very easily when society and individuals are unbalanced and unhappy. And secondly, the recent rise of religious extremism is a multifactorial phenomenon, depending on personal and communal motives, environmental conditions, and their interactions. Thus, the process of reducing extremism and radicalism in the Muslim world should encompass the individual, societal, governmental, and transnational stratum. And in sum, adhering to good governance may assist the authorities in regulating religious and other types of extremist behavior by providing well-being, safety, and happiness to an overwhelming majority of the population. So this is the very short explanation of the result of our study. Thank you very much for your attention. It's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elmira. That was very insightful and very similar to research that's been done by Naradila. I have a question for you. In reference to the factors of increase of extreme behavior, were you able to determine which was the bigger factor that drives individual to be radicalized? For example, did Islamophobia play a bigger factor compared to social grievance and injustice?
Okay,
Dr.
okay,
Elmira?
thank you. Yeah, I got the question. So for us, everything starts at the individual level. So, but what is happening outside of the world, like the Islamophobia, rise of Islamophobia, mainly we are not talking Islamophobia in Malaysia. In Malaysia is low level, what the existing Islamophobia. For us is the individual factor or the individual motives to become more receptive to become extremist. Extremist is the highest one, but still at the individual level, not all the extremists are, or with the extreme understanding of Islam, for example, they are receptive to some kind of the radical or the terrorist cause. But usually it is some people are receptive, others are passive, what we found. But again, if also this individual level is the most important one, but also the social level, when the social calls are coming, and also because individuals are made unhappy because of the living lifestyle, right? Lifestyle, and also what type of the problems they are facing in their everyday of life, or what type of the information they are getting, or so we found the individual is the most important, but this individual is also affected by the absence, as I mentioned, the good governance, and also some kind of the radicalization of the entire society. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Elmira. One last question. Why is it too easy to become radicalized in Muslim societies? Do you have an answer to that question, Doctor?
Yeah, I don't say that it is very easy to become radicalized in a Muslim society exclusively. In any society, we can be radicalized very easily. So because I am from Russia, actually. I was born and grew up in Russia. I mean, I can compare the different societies. We can be radicalized very easily when there are going to be, we are very receptive to differences. It's why we are mentioning here that the policies of the government and making people happy, and also the balance and the harmonious with everyone is, making them more open. If we are looking why exactly the Muslims in Malaysia, I'm giving just the results of only here. In Malaysia, we found because of the colonialism, they have some difficulties like the superiority complex, because of the feeling that the Muslims are like the chosen people, they are going to enter to Jannah. So this is feeling them somehow different than others, the higher level, and also inferiority complex. Also, these are some scholars were mentioning about these two. So it's not only in Islam, again, I mentioned in Christianity is the same, because I grew up among the Christians also. When you are said that you are going to enter to Jannah or paradise, if you are going to do so, when the religions are used as a motifs for the spread of extremism by religion, people might be more emotionally used, manipulated. So it is very easy to manipulate people by using religion and politics. So it's why they are become, when we are using, if you are going to go to the jihad, for example, you are going to enter to paradise and the God is going to be very pleased by you. So it's very easy. These are the places where we can press, and people are going to be more, they will react positively. It's why how the extremists and the terrorists are using such emotional tools like the politics, as I mentioned to you, and the religious, the motifs of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elmira. Now we're going to go to the third panel. Um, I will ask our third panel to please introduce yourself and your presentation. Mr. Muthana, are you ready?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello and a very good morning to everyone. Respected professors, organizing committees, secretariat, my fellow learned presenters, and dear friends. My name is Muthana Sa'ari from Research Division, Parliament of Malaysia. So this is my presentation. The title is Multiculturalism as a Driver in Preventing Radicalization. Next. So I will divide my presentation into four main agenda: introduction, the objectives of the study, then analysis and findings, and finally the conclusions. As introduction, we could easily remember the September 11, 2001 as the triggering event that started the global war and terrorism. Donald Rumsfeld, the then US Defense Secretary, critically asked if the world has turned out terrorists faster than the US can kill or capture them. A decade later, perhaps the fruit of the war on terrorism has engendered the uprisings in the Arab world, which originated from the town of Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia, which was due to factors as diverse as poverty and economic hardship, unemployment, and authoritarian rule. And I found the findings from Dr. Elmira's presentation regarding the internal factor and the socio-cultural and governance factor is quite relevant to what I would be presenting in the next slides. So the lack of recognition for someone to live a life that they value most could be decisive to determine the level of participation in society. So multiculturalism is a concept that recognizes the differences from various segments of society, whilst at the same time asks these different groups to integrate into the existing structure. Therefore, it is argued that multiculturalism has accorded sufficient recognition to minority groups, thus keeping them away from the disenfranchisement towards the mainstream society. Next. So this study explores the ways in which multiculturalism acts as a driver to avoid the radicalization process among people of difference in a multicultural society. The objectives of the study, firstly, to examine the view that cultural differences associated with political identity do not necessarily accommodate in building a coherent society. Secondly, to consider the implications of multifarious elements for political recognition to prevent radicalization process. And finally, to explore how multiculturalism addresses the issue of integration and assimilation of a multicultural society. Next. So the theoretical underpinning the study lies in the theory of politics of recognition by Jürgen Habermas, as well as the politics of recognition by Charles Taylor, of which both acknowledge the importance of recognition in determining identity of people from different backgrounds. So next, on cultural differences, the idea of culture merged with ethnic identity is a form of identity politics that risking culture to be presumed to be the property of an ethnic group. If you can go to the next slide. In the words of Antonio Gramsci, if I may quote, we must break the habit of thinking that culture is encyclopedic knowledge, whereby man is viewed as a mere container in which to pour and conserve empirical data or brute disconnected facts, which he will have to subsequently pigeonhole in his brain as in the columns of a dictionary. Differences also characterize the social relationship with the larger society, how an individual maintains its distinct identity within the society, and how the relationship within the larger society is kept. The struggle for recognition is the phenomena of certain group defending their rights and recognitions against oppression, marginalization, and disrespect. Some examples of this phenomenon will be mentioned in brief afterwards. And lastly, the politics of recognition, as I have introduced earlier, entails two different ways. First, the politics of equal dignity, and second, politics of difference. So these two ways of looking into the politics of recognition involve contestation between guaranteeing universally equal rights and entitlements on one hand, and forcing people into a homogeneous mold or uniformity on the other hand. Next. So next one, I put forward arguments on factors for the radicalization process, which could be categorized into two. First, the elements of recognition and prevention, and second, the quest for significance. Let me explain the latter. The psychological traits of proving the significance in something that matter could explain why a significance gain or significance loss could determine one's social identity. On another note, fulfilling one's significance goal could be the factor for reversing radicalization or even the de-radicalization. While for the elements of recognition, the state of deprivation, marginalization, discrimination, and recognition in society are factors that need attention to prevent radicalization. The economic marginalization and deprivation, most particularly, which constitutes a political economic approach, appear to be a major factor for the act of terrorism. Next. So this has leads to arguments that multiculturalism policy that has been practiced in several countries has failed. For example, the riot in the towns of Burnley, Oldham, and Bradford in the United Kingdom in 2001. Multiple reports have been produced, and some explicitly stated that low employment levels and economic opportunities for the ethnic minorities have been the triggering factors. While in 2005, the riot in the suburbs surrounding Paris was caused by systematic and policy-based discriminations led to use of ethnic minorities demanding equal treatment promises in the country. And in the Netherlands in 2004, if we can remember the assassination of Theo van Gogh, the filmmaker of Submission, which projected a negative perception against Islam by a Dutch with Moroccan origin. So the early multiculturalism policy adopted in the Netherlands has encouraged cultural preservation among ethnic minorities. Although cultural rights are granted, the labor market has been neglected, leading to discrimination against these people. Next one. So in this last section, my analysis, the issue of integration and assimilation has been a thorn in a multicultural society. Individual rights and collective rights have been the subject of contentious debate. However, group differentiated rights, as advocated by Wilkim Lika, a strong proponent for multiculturalism, ensure minority groups would not be discriminated from countrywide decisions. As for integration, I would also like to quote the words of Roy Jenkins, the former Home Secretary of the United Kingdom in 1966, which he said that I do not think we need in this country a melting pot, which will turn everyone out in a common mold. I define integration not as a flattening process of uniformity, but cultural opportunity in an atmosphere of mutual tolerance. So the underlying principle of integration in multiculturalism is to bring people of all different backgrounds together. As Tariq Mudud said, the goal of democratic multiculturalism cannot and should not be cultural neutrality, but rather the inclusion of marginal and disadvantaged groups, including religious communities in public life. So all the rights to group integration and inclusion resulted in assimilation to be seen as contrasting to the others. Although it seems to offer a solution for a cohesive society, assimilation could as well lead to individuals surrendering their native culture that could put them under an inferior and disadvantaged position. Next. So to conclude my presentation, multiculturalism as a policy is not merely a fashionable approach with a sleight of hand to deceive people of different groups. It entirely deals with the difficulties in managing differences in society, particularly on how people associate their identification with exerting their position in society. Next. And finally, multiculturalism has addressed the issue of cultural differences and their identification in a political society for a coherent society. The importance of recognition, namely political, social, and economical, to the people of different background, is to ensure that no room for radicalization could be exploited. I think that will end my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muthana. I have a question for you. So the question is, multiculturalism is also having multiculturalism is also having very worse consequences. Can you discuss some critical views of multiculturalism in terms of radicalization?
The issue of group differentiated rights, which some practices on multiculturalism policy has resulted in minority groups demanding for polyethnicity groups, which in the worst case might lead for a separate life, separate group rights, including the political rights, which will endanger the cohesion of a larger society. One of the critical aspects of multiculturalism, whereby we recognize the differences to the extent of like extreme rights claimant from the group of different background. So that one of the critical opinion on the multiculturalism policy. Apart from the example that I have given in my presentations now.
All right, thank you for that answer, Mr. Murthana. Another question is, integration and assimilation in Malaysia seems to take a step back. Are we seeing potential a wider radicalized community, especially among the Muslim community in Malaysia, due to rejection towards integration assimilation?
As I said, the concept of integration and assimilation entails the relationship between individual within the groups and within the larger society. As for integration, it involves the mutual tolerance. It's a give and take process. It's a two-way process between the minority to be included in the larger society, as well as the larger society to give some of their entitlements or their rights to the minority groups. While it is quite contrasting with the assimilation, if we can see in the practice of laïcité in French society, where they would need a full and total assimilation of people of different background into a uniform culture, which resulted in some kind of rejection because of the differences in the cultural thinking of the people. So if we do not deal with the type of right integration or assimilation between people of minority groups within the larger society, I'm afraid that it will trigger those that presented by Dr. Almira, the internal factors, the socio-cultural factors within the individuals to become radicalized or de-radicalized in this.
Thank you for the answer. I have one more question from Mr. Greg Lopez. In defining multiculturalism, did you take into consideration the different strands of Islam in Malaysia? Would multiculturalism encompass different views of Islam?
To me, from my reading, the definition of multiculturalism, culture is a wide concept of things that also represent the differences of sect in Islam as well. If we could, in my word just now, the mutual tolerance, if we can accept the differences even in the Islamic religion, as if we can go back to the juries, the differences in producing the rulings, which has enriched the knowledge of usul al-fiqh. So I think that's the importance of recognizing the differences even within intra-Islamic teaching. So multiculturalism is a concept that we recognize differences not only in the typical definition of culture, but in the wide definition of culture, which includes the thinking, the sectarian, and everything. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Muthana, for that answer. So we're gonna move on to our fourth panel. Our fourth panel is Mr. Raja Muhammad Khairul Akhtar, also a friend of mine. Mr. Raja, please introduce yourself and your research. Thank you.
Right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning and evening to everyone. All right. Thank you to Brother Hafiz for being moderator today, and also thank you to the uh, whoever behind this webinar. All right. So today I would like to present to you about my finding of my research with title Mechanisms of Policy Implementation of Counter-Violent Extremism in Malaysia. My name is Raja Muhammad Khairul Akhtar bin Raja Muhammad Najib. Next slide, please. All right, this is what would you expect throughout this presentation. I would like to introduce to you the about this paper, and also next point about evolution of CVE. Next is actors involved, and also indicators and phrases of counter-violent extremism policy implementation, and also the conclusion. Next, next. All right. So we begin with the concept and approach of policy implementation. Why I choose this first? Because my title is about policy implementation itself. So definition. The policy implementation process analyze the action taken by various parties involved in implementing the policies that are established to achieve a predetermined goal. And another definition is about the choice of implementation route matter immensely in determining the success or failure of the policy, as this study of policy implementation attempts to address why and how policy deviate or conform from the desired goal or successfully implemented. So based on this definition, I take the one concept that as core for my research. According to DAN 2014, policy implementation process allows the researcher to examine the fundamental feature of policy implementation. There are three things. First is identifying actors involved. Second, to know administrative unit, and third is how the policy is being implemented. So based on these three things that my research will be proved. So based on this concept, the approach that I use is top-down approach that is able to advise government to have a clear and consistent goal, to limit the extent of the change necessary, and to place the responsibility to implementation with an agency sympathetic to the policy's goal. Why I choose this approach? It is because in Malaysia, anything related to defense and also the internal security that was written in the ninth schedule of our federal constitution. Next. Now we're moving on to evolution of counter-violent extremism policy in Malaysia. Why the evolution happened? Malaysia faced the development of terrorist threat that have been brought into the country. This evolution was considered as the contemporary and emerging risk and threat because it caused security challenges taking place beyond state boundary. And what kind of the threat that we're facing recently? According to Gunaratna 2017, despite group of terrorists facing off on the battlefield, the method of spreading the ideology has evolved and they gain support through online social media. Next. And what and how evolution of counter-violent extremism policy in Malaysia. CVE had been implemented a long time ago, for your information. It was when Malay went through the Malayan emergency from 1948 to 1960. And uh, it can be considered as successful in counterinsurgency against the violent act by communist terrorists. Another one, it is because counter-violent extremism in Malaysia emphasized three important elements. First, legislation. Second, rehabilitation. And third one is education. All of this CVE is a combination of hard approach that we can see that law and detention, and also the soft approach, rehabilitation and educational initiative. Next. So when I talk about just now, we have the and soft approach, and also the proactive and reactive measure. What is the difference between that time and the present time of the implementation of CVE in Malaysia? Next. So here is my finding during this research. Evolution of counter-violent extremism policy in Malaysia. I make a comparison between two timeline, 1948 to 1960, and the present time that we are trying to do. We are trying to implement the CVE currently. So the similarities, yes, we can find the similarities between two period of time in terms of element of implementation CVE. We have a hard and soft approach. We also have a proactive and reactive measure. But what make it difference in terms of mechanism? Previously, we have phases that how the policy itself being implemented through pre-detention phase and also during detention phase. Meanwhile, during present time, Malaysia implementing three phases of counter-violent extremism: pre-detention, mid-detention, and also post-detention. The only changes that happened over the amendment of the law and the renewal of the method. Renewal of method that will be discussed throughout this presentation, in which we can see how the different has been made, and also in terms of elements and also the mechanism. Next. Actors involved in implementing counter-violent extremism. Next. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what is the actors involved during the policy of implementation of CVE today? According to Novel, Corin, Vera, and Hill 2011, proposed that actors in the policy process develop strategies and tactics, or even able to adopt goal-oriented behavior. Why we use actors involved element into the policy implementation? Because public policy are created by linking several actors who are from various ministry and institution involved as far as the boundaries of non-governmental organization, and how the policy actors can be used in policy implementation. According to Sydney, the advantage of approach can be used to measure government policy implementation through the following criteria: have clear and consistent goal, to limit the extent of exchange necessary, and also to place the responsibility for implementation with an agency sympathetic to the policy goal. Next. All right. This is what I analyzed from throughout my research, and this is the finding. I class all the actors into tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Next. This study categorized the group based on their level of hierarchy, policy implementation. There are tier 1 refers to delegated legislation, tier 2 refers to the relevant regulatory bodies, and also the tier 3 refers to civil society that include non-governmental organization, think tanks, and also the academic institution. Therefore, all the tier 1, 2, and 3 actually just to depict the flow of power derived from the top executive position in the government to the lower levels of entity who will execute this policy. Next. All right, this is indicators and phases of counter-violent extremism policy implementation. Next. All right, I would like to share to you, before we go further, we have to know first what is the radicalization process. Radicalization is adopting process. Adopting process begin with learning, inculcating and deepening an extremist ideology or narrative, cognitive, emotively and spiritually until it becomes part of person's ideology. All right, according to Al Muhammadi 2020, he identified phases of radicalization. First, phases about cognitive oriented. Second, emotive oriented. Third, faith oriented. And last but not least, action oriented. We have to remember the terrorism will not occur, or we will not label a person with the term of terrorist until the individual translates their ideology into violent action. Next. All right, this is an indicator of counter-violent extremism. Actually, CVE implementation framework is utilized by experts and also being referred by the authorities as well as the police. And in each phase of frame time, it will involve actors or authority related to their roles, to the potential extremists, and also who already act as extremists. Next. All right, ladies and gentlemen, actually, the counter-violent extremism was adopted from the public health model to do its focus on effectively targeting intervention. Okay, what is inside the public health model or that was adopted by counter-violent extremism policy implementation? There is a primary stage that refer to general target of the audience, which means they will conduct counter-violent extremism programs to counter narrative. And also the secondary stage refer to suspected target group of audience society. And if the expert confirm whether those individuals are involved through their extreme action, then the authority has to commence intervention on this matter, in which we can say this is the tertiary stage. Next. So this is what interviewee said during I personal interview him. This public health model to be imposed on counter-violent extremism issue has been used during their meeting by with United Nations. Then they have been trained and also exposed with the indicators on how to identify fundamental indicators on behavior of extremist inclined individual. Next. All right. So we already at the stage of remember during the concept that I mentioned before, we already at the stage of on how the policy being implemented. So this is the phases of counter-violent extremism policy implementation. Prevention phase. We talk about who are the actors involved. Obviously, tier 1, 2, and 3. How the policy being implemented, the CVE implemented through collaboration, talks, conference, and program to counter narrative of extremism. Next is about the during detention phase. Who are the actors involved? We can see some from the tier 1 and collaborated with tier 2 and also tier 3. What happened during the detention phase is about the prison department will isolate the detainees, and also the debate or discussion between expert and detainees exists to counter narrative or to re-educate all the detainees, and activities based on religion and improvement of vocational skill, and also assessment and rehab. What happened during post detention? The actors involved during the post detention is still tier 1, 2, and 3, but some of them from tier 1 and tier 2 and also tier 3. So how the policy is being implemented during post detention? They will receive one of money to assist them in beginning their new life, and also they will always be monitored by tier 2, only RMP, Royal Malaysia Police, and also become close with expert from tier 3. So for your information, prevention phase just I mentioned before, the target group is in general, but during the detention and also the post-detention phase, the target group is the individual who has been suspected and also detained into the detention center. Next. So this is the first this is the interview second for interview 2 from personal interview that see that CVE in Malaysia has been implemented comprehensively based on time frame such as before, during detention and after detention. Next. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a bit detailed what happened during the prevention phase. We have an international initiative, and also we also have domestic initiative. During the international initiative, they are Asian ministerial meeting, Malaysia Police collaboration with international police, and also there is a friendly service system that I will explain later. And what happened during the domestic initiative? Capacity building among citizens by several ministries. They launched the talks, conference, campaign, and awareness, such as the recent event that has been done before during 2019, Youth Empowerment on Counter-Violent Extremism by Ministry of Youth and Sport, National Youth Power Club, and ISTEC IIUM. Next. Okay, this is the friendly services technically. It's about the sharing intelligent agency by sharing exchange information and also thought between all the intelligence unit among countries. Next. This is what I mentioned before about the implementation of the policy according to ministries. Next. All right, this is during detention. The detainees' family members receive some monetary assistance from the Zakat State Center and also the welfare bodies. Next. And this is post-detention. Former detainees will be given some amount of money. In this post-detention phase, less than 3% of former detainees return to be part of terror of extremist group. All right, next. All right, this is conclusion. Next. The implementation of counter-violent extremism policy is in Malaysia has been manifested through the top-down approach, whereby the implementation is derived from government to the society or stakeholder in society, and counter-violent extremism is a proactive action, and it is also proactive measure that originate from education-based intervention in situation of countering and preventing extremist ideology from becoming worse that can lead to terrorist attacks. Next. All right, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raja. So I do not think that we have time for a Q&A. I'm going to proceed with the last panel, which is Miss Amelia Yuliana Abdul Wahab and her research. Miss Amelia, please introduce yourself and the research finding. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafiz. Hi, Assalamualaikum, and a very good day, everyone. I'm Emilia from Malaysia. I'm representing my research team. They are Associate Professor Dr. Munisni, also from Malaysia, and Dr. Zulkifli Harza from Indonesia. This is actually the collaboration between the two countries, Malaysia and Indonesia. And our research finding that we're going to share today is actually at the early stage of research. Okay, this is our research topic. revisiting history of Malaysian higher education and violent extremism, focusing on the University and University College Act, AUKU, to counter armed communists in second emergency. Next. Next. Before that. So I'm going to briefly talk about the introduction of our research, a gap in literatures, a research objective, methodology that we use, finding and discussion, and lastly, conclusion. Next. The threat of extremisms become a serious threat to harmony, peace, prosperity, and stability in Southeast Asia regions. Terrorism has long been part of higher education. This is because higher education students are extremely fragile, lack of experience, and they are actually at the stage of discovering their identity. And because of that, that makes them an easy target to radical ideology. However, this discourse on extremism in Southeast Asia region, especially focusing on majority Muslim population state like Malaysia and Indonesia, mostly the discourse is focusing more on religious extremism. As a consequence, discourse of another types of extremism is lacking. Next. We would like to refer to the category of extremism as highlighted by the National Consortium for Study of Terrorism and Responses of Terrorism, START. START has classified the extremisms into the 6 category. And for this research, we focusing on the left-wing extremism. In another word, is the communist, the armed communist illegals activities during the second emergency in Malaysia. So second emergency, I would like to give a brief about the second emergency. Is an undeclared state of emergency by the authority in curbing the continuous illegal activity of armed communists after the first emergency end in 1960. Okay, at that time, the situation getting more worse after the riot happened in Kuala Lumpur on 30th May 1969. So the period of undeclared state of emergency is actually from 1969 to 1989. Next. So who are the left wings extremism and what actually their intentions? Okay, left wing extremism are those who want to topple the existing democratic state or the government and social order by replacing democracy with communist or anarchist system through the participation in social protest and unrest in order to embed their ideologies to the masses. Next, factor contributing to the violent extremism during the second emergencies. Okay, there are 4 factors that I'm going to highlight. First of all, of course, the impact of international security conflict. It was during the Cold War period. Southeast Asia region was affected too with the power struggles and hegemonic expansion of superpower. The second one is the state economic and social condition. At that time, the state have to face the high poverty and employment rate, and also the imbalanced distribution of economic wealth between the multiracial society in Malaysia. And then the state political instability, that is because after the general elections in 1969, the masses and the voters during that time, the majority was upset with the result and also with the socio-economic condition at that time. And last but not least, is the historical experience, the negative experience that the state and the people have to face during the first emergency. It's not easy for the Malaya during that time to gain independence in 31st August 1957. So after that, the state still have to face the same threat, which is the armed illegal communist activities. Next. Okay, on the left side, it is the strategies that being illustrate. I took from Muhammad Aziz. He illustrate on the strategy to counter violent extremism in Malaysia, and he mentions that this is through his research. He said that this strategy is successfully implemented during the first emergency. So we apply his strategies and we're focusing on the legislation, which is AUKU, the higher education legislative, and also education, focusing on higher education. So on the right side, you can see that AUKU was introduced after the ethnic riot that happened in Kuala Lumpur on 30th May 1969, and that is during the state of emergency, where the state have to form the National Operation Council, NOC, and it led by our second Prime Minister, the late Tun Abdul Razak, in 1917. So the finding from the committee became the basis of AUKU 1971 and passed by the Parliament on March 1971. At the beginning, the Act, the provision of the Act is referred as a legal instrument, emphasizing on the establishment of the university in Malaysia. Next. This is just a picture whereby the demonstrations by the masses, the students, they are rejected the implementations, the continuous implementation of AUKU, because for them, because of it, the legislative restricted the academic freedom and autonomy. Next. And then in 2018, after the election and after the new government was formed, the AUKU was amended, and now the student can actively participate in politics inside the campus and also outside the campus. Next. Okay, I mentioned just now why the left-wing extremism like to get attention and to recruit the university student. I need to emphasize the past studies by the CVE, and when he conduct a research comparing the left-wing extremism and right-wing extremism, he mentions that most of the left-wing extremism are professional workers, and most of them living in urban area with more capacity to organize their movement. And once they commit a military revolution, they were more of a threat than the right-wing extremism. Next. Discourse of higher education legislative AUKU highlight more on the drawbacks, portraying authority use power to oppress and abuse higher education using this so-called draconian law that restricted the academic freedoms and university autonomy. Okay, on the other arguments, other discourse, they highlight that during the second emergency, ALCU, especially amendment made in 1975, could be portrayed as the basis of indirect legal instruments to manage the government of higher education and academic activity, especially the involvement of students in politics. Uh, okay, it is actually important to understand the rationale of the state uh, behaving on such a way using stringent and strict law in public higher educations during the second emergency. I went through the memo written by the Secretary General of Communist Party of Malaya, Ong Boon Hua, or better known as Chim Peng, and he said that the armed returning uh, of communists in Malaysia after the first emergency is the important requirement is to reconsolidate CPM entire organization through political educations. As a researcher, we want to know how far the political education has been used by the armed communists during this second emergency. Next. Therefore, we're going to explore the behavior of left-wing extremism or the armed communists in disseminating their ideology to the mass, especially in influencing the youth in the period of second emergency. Next. How we want to study the behavior of this left-wing extremism is already past. It's already like 40 years back. It's already history. What we done is that through the methodology, we study the language. Okay, we use this critical discourse analysis to emphasize, by emphasizing the role of language to know the behavior of this left-wing extremism. Okay, the specimen that we use for this early research is selected radio content, the transcript of Voice of Malaya Revolution that being translated in English language. Actually, this is the clandestine radios owned by the Communist Party of Malaya, and it is broadcast in Hunan, China, and started the operation in November 1969, and all the content was broadcast all the way from Hunan to Malaysia and Singapore during the period of second emergency. Next. We have the 10 selected transcript of Voice of Malayan Revolution. And next. Next, please. So this is the example of the transcript, and you can see on the left and on the right side, the transcript of Voice of Malaya Revolution from year 1970 to 1975, and from 1975 to 1961. Okay, you can see a lot of activities being shared by these armed communists during the second emergency in Malaysia. Next. Okay, from the specimen that we use, the transcript from Voice of Malaya Revolution, we use this qualitative research software, Atlas T, and we want to know what is the main purpose of what is the real main purpose of armed communist illegal activity during the second emergency, and we detect that they use a lot of the word enemy, which imply to those who are opposed with their communist ideology and activity. You can see the name of Raza, which is our Malaysian second Prime Minister, and then we can see keep mentioning about the police, the military, and the masses, and then we conclude at this stage that um, the radio content revealed that the word enemy was mostly used, implied that CPM was targeting to eliminate or kill those who are opposed with their communist ideology and activity. Next. Okay, you can see on the right side is the example of the transcript from the voice of Malaya Revolutions. And then we noticed that during this period, second emergency, the Communist Party of Malaya was divided into three factions. But the factions that continuously with their illegal activity in Malaysia is those following this Mao Zedong thought. You can see on the left side, they mentioning that CPM policy and Mao Zedong thought, and they keep talking about the Mao Zedong thought. Next. Next, please. As we also conclude that the Communist Party of Malaya, they use two approaches, which is violence. You can see from the selected transcript that I highlighted on the left side, August 22nd, 1970 until 1975. Okay, and then also they use the non-violent approaches, and they attract the university student, the union, and they are taking all the opportunity, any national issues, they will take the street to do the demonstrations and to influence the masses, especially the youth, the university student. So that on the right side is the example of this transcript that we taken from their clandestine radios. Next. Okay, as a conclusion, as the academic freedom and university are necessity in higher education institution, the suitable mechanism to counter with the violent extremism in higher education through the strict and stringent legislation should be available to balance with this necessity. On our early stage research finding revealed a left-wing armed communists use violent and non-violent approaches. Okay, and we also found out that in the Malaysian history indicate how AUKU 1971, with reference to the amendment made in 1975, managed to indirectly tone down and change the student behavior from being radical to be more moderate in discussing issue of public interest, especially in sensitive issue. Next. Okay, last but not least, this is the articles in the social media that we took. This is just recently happened after the movement control order, and we can see quite a similar trend whereby the restaurant has decorated in such a manner. The restaurant in Penang, in Pulau Pinang, in Johor Bahru, and also in Malacca. This is only part of it. I think there are many incidents, but I just want to highlight this, okay, as a reflections during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. With that, I think I end my presentation with the question that does COVID-19 pandemic will instigate the uprising of left-wing extremism in Southeast Asia regions. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amelia. We have a few questions question for you. The first question is, calling left-wing ideology as extremism and extremist ideology, do you think that is a biased research approach? Do you think it is a biased research
Do you
approach to call left-wing ideology as extremist and extremism ideology?
That's the reason why we need to study the behaviors of their actions. Because if I talk about what is already happened on the past, the methodology is very important in research. That's the reason why in this research we use the primary resources, which is the transcript from the radio's revolutions of Malaya, which is the clandestine propaganda radio of communists, and we can study that. If you can see the slide, and if you study the transcript, you can see how violent they are. It's not me actually who make that statement. I mean, through the research, you can see a lot of word like killing, a lot of word like enemy. So I think we are not labeling left-wing extremists as the violence extremists. Extremists, yes. It is through our research. Yes. Am I answering your question?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. That question was from Dr. Imran Ali Sandano. Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Imran. Another question is, are you able to comment on the impact of global far-right thinking in this region?
Because at the moment, I'm focusing on the left wing's extremism based on the past history. But in future, maybe I can comment because I'm going to, to continually to continues this research, and I think the same method will be applied for the current situations. So I can only comment on my research, which is the past event at this stage. But I'm looking forward actually to continue do the research on left-wing extremism in the context of the current situation, especially during this COVID-19 pandemics.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that answer. One last question for you, Dr. Emilia. This is a question from Mr. Greg Lopez. He said that it's a fascinating history of Malaysia that you present what you're presenting today, and he wanted to clarify, how does this research define extremism? How does your research define extremism, Ms. Emilia? That was the question.
Okay. It is based on, like I mentioned, it's not, we have to have the evidence, solid evidence. We cannot say that, oh, you did that, that is the act of extremism. No. Like in this research, we use the transcript of the radios. From that, we can see how the language has been used. A lot of, if you can go back, if you can read their radio transcript, and you can see a lot of wording that is implied with something on, extremisms and all that. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Emilia. I do believe that we are at the end of our session, but we have a lot of leftover questions from the attendees for the previous panelists. Some of these questions are diverted to our first presenter, Nuradila, and also to maybe some of the other panels could answer the question for other for some of the question. So Nuradila, are you still there? So we have a few questions for you, Nuradila. So the first question is coming from Neil. Your data shows that 80% of those recruited were enticed through online, but could you draw a conclusion that the online recruitment happened because of the friends and family's enticement? This question is diverted to Noradila. Ms. Noradila, are you still there?
Hello.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
So the question would be based on the online pathways. Hafiz, hello?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yes, yes. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Would you mind to repeat it once again?
Sure, no problem. So, based on your data, 80% of those recruited were enticed through online. So,
Okay.
could you draw a yeah? Could you draw a conclusion that the online recruitment happened because of friends and family's enticement instead of the online enticement? Can you comment on that?
No. Okay. When we talk about online recruitment, most of the cases they did not know one another. It's just like for example, there are several cases in the Telegram due to the there is one cases that they just wanted to know about ISIS. Okay, so they just joined the Telegram group. Okay, when they joined the Telegram group, and then after that, they feel confident. They feel confident about the group, and they feel that they can be part of that group. So because of that, they join the group. So what am I trying to say here is that most of the cases they did not know each other, especially in the online recruitment. Except coming from family and friends recruiters, they will know each other. So most of the cases they did not know each other.
All right, thank you so much for that answer, Nardila. I have a few more. I hope you can answer more questions. This is coming from Mr. Greg Lopez. He said that it's a great presentation. Dila, a very basic question. What were the resources of your data of the profile on Malaysian terrorism? I think you explained that in your slides. Can you repeat what are the resources?
All right. Thank you, Greg Lopez. Okay, for my data collection, mainly I am collecting from journal, Lexis and Lexis journal. Okay, and then from newspapers, all the newspapers in Malaysia and also outside Malaysia. And then I am also looking at the research paper coming from Iman Research, Siasat, IRIS, also another research from UKM, USM, USIM, and also coming from one of the research center in Singapore. I can't remember the name. Yeah. And there are certain pathways that are coming from the detainees itself. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's all from me.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, okay, so this is the last question for you, Noradila. It comes from Dr. Romel Banlao. Dr. Romel Banlao is from the Philippines. He is the chairman of the Philippine Institute for Peace, Violence, and Terrorism Research and convener of the Network for the Prevention of Violent Extremism in the Philippines. So his question is, based on your profiling, what do you think are some of the drivers of, the question is, sorry, that was not the question. The question is, Dr. Ramil Banlo wanted to know if the state of violent extremism in Malaysia is spreading violent extremism in the Philippines, or is it going vice versa? Do you get the question, Nora?
Would you mind to repeat it once again?
Yeah, the question is the state of violence extremism in Malaysia spreading violent extremism in the Philippines? And vice versa?
Okay, for that question, okay, thank you, doctor, for that question. Okay, in my investigation, I would say that it can be both ways. Philippine coming to Malaysia and also Malaysian going to the Philippines. There is the events, how can I say this? It is interrelated between Malaysian and also Philippines. The influence is coming from the Philippines and also the influence can be both ways, I would say. Yeah, because there is a cases that there is a cases that the detainees are influenced due to the Philippines conflicts, ISIS conflicts, and also there is cases where Philippines has been recruited after they join the Telegram group that is created by the Malaysian people, Malaysian recruiters. So it can be both ways, I would say, based on my data collection. Yes.
All right, thank you, Lila. Thank you. Sorry to have been working you up too much, but okay. So we have another 2 minutes before 2 minutes to 11. I think we have one last question for all of the panels. Any of the panels who want to answer this question, you are more than welcome to answer it. The final question is, why young people from majority group in Malaysia attracted to terrorist ideology? Why young people from majority group in Malaysia attracted to terrorist ideology? This question is open to everyone, any of the panel. If you could, any of the panelists would answer this question, it would be very great. Maybe Mr. Muthana bin Sa'ari could answer this question. Why do young people are so attracted to terrorism ideology? You were talking about cultural multiculturalism at the in your presentation, Mr. Muthana. Do you think you can answer this question?
Thank you, Hafiz, for the question. I don't really any data or like empirical study on the tendency of the majority young people to head into the extremism, but it would in the context of cultural differences, as I have commented in one of the questions posted before, it perhaps because of the threat, if you could say, the threat of the ethnic minorities rights claimant, that the majority groups, the larger society groups, feels that the social coherence in the society has been threatened, which resulted to some kind of repercussions towards the radicalization among this majority group. That I would suggest some kind of response to perhaps the question that I posted. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. So I do believe this is that question concluded our session for today. Thank you so much for all of the attendees, and also especially and also thank you very much to all the panelists for making time and present your insightful research. So I do believe that this is the end of our panel.
Thank you, everyone.